That's the penalty for ordering me around.
On a deserted beach in the middle of the night, I was left behind by Michael. Michael's car sped away, leaving me in the dust. I had received a sudden call late at night that my mother had collapsed, so I had asked Michael to drive me to the hospital. But now, suddenly, I found myself abandoned. Overwhelmed by the shock and sadness of Michael's betrayal, tears streamed down my face. The hospital where my mother was taken is almost 3 hours away from here. Sweaty and teary-eyed, I began to walk determinedly. Why did this have to happen to me? I remembered the days spent with Michael, but as I walked, I slowly regained my composure. And with that, the sorrow of betrayal transformed into anger. I will never forgive him. I'll make him regret doing this to me for the rest of his life. Vowing revenge on Michael, I continued on my way to the hospital. My name is Caitlin Anderson. I am a 47-year-old office worker. Ever since I was young, I've been uncomfortable around people, which led me to work at a computer-related company after college. Both of my parents raised me strictly, so I've been good at studying since I was in elementary school. But being a quiet person, I often felt looked down upon by others, leading me to prefer solitude. I get stressed out from constantly considering others' feelings, and it drains me. Throughout high school and college, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, but I continued my studies as my parents wanted. While most of my peers in college enjoyed events and mixers, I led a quiet school days. Yet, I made a few close friends during those times. One of them was a classmate named Susan Miller. Susan and I took many of the same classes, so we naturally started talking more. When I first met her, Susan was as unassuming and mature as I was, but as the years went on, she changed. She began wearing flashier clothes and makeup, and started hanging out with the kind of people I wasn't comfortable around. But in the end, she always treated me the same as when we first met. I would often see Susan around campus with a different guy each time, seeming like a completely different person from before. But I was always grateful that she still wanted to be friends with me. After graduation, we continued to meet up for meals and outings, keeping our friendship alive. I have a few friends from my college days besides Susan, but none of them have a good impression of her. They were like, I don't want to speak ill of Susan because she's Caitlin's friend, but be careful around her. That's what everyone would always say. Things changed with Susan around the time we turned 43. Out of the blue, Susan asked if I wanted to join a mixer. Just the word mixer made me cautious, and I gently turned her down. But surprisingly, Susan was still single and was thinking of hosting a party to potentially find a spouse. At my age, I couldn't even imagine dating anyone, as I had no experience with men. I was like, I can't do a mixer at this point in my life. I said with a chuckle, and Susan replied with a serious face. I really want to find someone serious now. Don't worry, there won't be any flaky people like before. Maybe Susan was aware that I knew about her past relationships, so she emphasized that this would be a genuine gathering. Moved by her enthusiasm, I decided to attend. But there's no guarantee of finding a match, okay? You never know if there's gonna be a compatible person. I was worried about embarrassing the host, Susan, but she was delighted with my decision to attend. A few days later, the day of the gathering arrived. I dressed up, a bit out of my comfort zone, and arrived at the meeting place 30 minutes earlier than the specified time. As I waited, a bit overwhelmed by the crowd, a man approached me. Excuse me, are you here for Susan's dinner party? The man who approached me had such a youthful face that he could easily be mistaken for someone in their 20s. He mentioned he was attending through Susan's invitation. He introduced himself as Michael Anderson and was only 2 years younger than me. His appearance, giving off a slightly flashy impression, but his manner of speaking showed sincerity. Michael, laughing about how he arrived early because of his nerves, somehow made me feel a strange kinship with him. After a while, everyone arrived, and the dinner began. I chatted with other men, but my attention was solely on Michael. Caitlin, you seem to like Michael, don't you? Susan whispered as we both went to the restroom at the same time. Later on, with Susan's help, Michael and I exchanged contact information. I was elated, but I worried it might be bothersome for him. However, Michael cheerfully suggested let's have dinner again. It seemed Susan didn't find a match at the mixer and seemed a bit down about it. I apologized multiple times, feeling guilty about being the only one who made a connection, but she just laughed it off, asking why I was saying sorry. Afterward, Michael and I went on several dates and began a relationship. It's kinda weird, right? Having no experience with men at my age? I often voiced this concern, but Michael would always hold me tight in reassurance. About 3 years later, when I was 46, Michael proposed and we got married. It still doesn't feel real that I got married, and life feels a bit surreal. Michael worked in sales at a major cosmetics company, and considering our age, we decided not to have children. I chose to continue working, supporting Michael's lifestyle. However, about 6 months into our marriage, Michael's behavior began to change. The ever-so-kind Michael started hurling verbal abuse at me.
Why are you always so damn nagging? Why do I have to care about your feelings all the time?
Michael, in his anger, kicked the trash can and chairs around the room. But after a while, he'd calm down, crying and apologizing. He'd say things like he's overwhelmed with work, or the pressure's building up and he's stressed out. Listening to Michael's struggles, I'd stay by his side until he felt better. Feeling guilty about discussing our problems with Susan, who introduced us, I kept everything to myself. Taking advantage of my patience and kindness, Michael's behavior escalated. He rarely came straight home after work, usually returning late at night. Whenever I'd ask him about it, he'd get angry and dismissive. Is this how all men are? With my limited experience in relationships, I couldn't help but wonder if Michael's behavior was normal. During this time, a friend from college visited my house. That's just not right, no matter how you look at it. As I laughed and talked about my married life, my friend said that to me with a serious face.
But he's usually so kind, you know? After he gets like that, he apologizes.
Hearing this, my friend just shook her head in disbelief and said, Caitlin, he's taking you for granted because you don't speak up. If you keep letting it go on, he's gonna walk all over you and it'll be too late to do anything about it. But Michael has never been physically violent to me. He's tired from work every day. Isn't it okay for him to let loose a bit when he comes home? If I nag too much, Michael, who chose to marry someone like me, might end up disliking me. I gave my friend a brief reply and pondered if there was something I might have done wrong. A few days later, I decided to open up to Susan about my life with Michael. His late nights, his tantrums and harsh words when he's in a bad mood.
Oh, many guys do that. He is probably just jealous of you and that's why he's saying such things.
Susan's answer was exactly what I was hoping for. Everyone has their struggles in marriage. I want Michael, who chose someone like me, to live as comfortably as possible. All it takes is a bit of patience on my part. I was grateful to Susan for listening to my troubles and decided to do my best to be a good wife. Life with Michael continued as usual, but following Susan's advice, I tried even harder to be patient and play the role of a good wife. Then, one Saturday night, both Michael and I had the day off, and he had gone to play at a casino since morning and returned home in the late afternoon. From the moment Michael opened the door, I could tell he had lost a lot of money and was in a bad mood. I did my best not to upset him, avoiding anything that might provoke him. Still, he yelled at me about dinner being late, the bathroom being not clean, and so on. Michael went to bed late. Once Michael, who had been raging, finally settled down, I too could finally relax. Being careful not to make any noise that might wake Michael, I began to watch a drama I had been looking forward to on a streaming service. But I must have been more tired than I realized. Before I knew it, I had fallen asleep on the sofa. The next thing I knew, my phone, which was set to vibrate, was making a loud noise on the table. Oh no, if Michael woke up before me, he's gonna be mad. In a panic, I grabbed my phone and checked the screen. It was past 1 a.m. It wasn't an alarm, but a call that had caused the phone to vibrate so loudly. Though my mind was still foggy from sleep, seeing the displayed name snapped me to attention. Dad? Seeing the name Dad on the screen makes my heart flutter. Getting a call at this hour, something must have happened. I answer, expecting the worst.
Caitlin? Your mom fainted when she got up to go to the bathroom. I called 911. They've taken her to the hospital.
My father's voice on the other end is clearly shaken, his usual calm demeanor gone.
Caitlin, I need you to come to the hospital as soon as you can.
Panicking, I ask for the hospital's location and hang up. As I'm getting ready and heading to the front door, I realize I can't drive. And at this hour, public transport's not an option. It's an emergency concerning Michael's mother-in-law. If I wake Michael, he'd surely be willing to drive. Rushing to the bedroom where Michael is sleeping, I shake him awake.
Michael, Michael!
At my call, Michael grumbles irritably. Keep it down. With my eyes closed, I tell the still grumbling Michael about my mother's situation.
We gotta get going. Get the car ready.
Losing my patience with Michael, who's just rolling around in bed, I raise my voice. Then Michael clicks his tongue, finally throwing the covers off and sitting up.
Hey!
Still in his sweatpants, Michael grabs the car keys and heads towards the car, leaving me behind.
I'm really sorry for waking you up at this hour.
Once in the car, I tell Michael which hospital my mother was taken to, repeatedly apologizing. The two of us drive in silence on the deserted road towards the hospital. When we approach a coast with a view of the ocean on our left, Michael suddenly stops the car. Hey, can you get me a coffee from that store? I need to wake up. It makes sense, he was jolted awake and now he's driving. Probably not thinking straight with the drowsiness. I nod silently, open the car door, and head to the store at a brisk pace.
Let's see. Michael can't take it black, so something sweet would be good.
I chose the sweetest looking coffee, then just to be sure, also select a light sugar latte and another drink. The moment I left the store after taking them, Michael rolled down the car window.
That's the penalty for ordering me around!
Michael shouted at me, and the next thing I knew, his car was speeding away. I stood there, in shock, watching Michael's car disappear at high speed, unable to grasp what just happened. What did Michael yell out to me when he opened the window? The penalty for ordering me around? As I stood by the store, holding the bottles of coffee, moths drawn to the light of the store flew into me. It took me a while to comprehend Michael's words and the reality of my situation. Did he even direct those words at me? Was it some sort of joke? But gradually, I remembered the urgency concerning my mother, and I found myself walking along the coastline without really thinking. The tepid sea breeze blew, and I kept walking on the deserted shore. Walking helped to clear my panicking mind. I was left behind by Michael. He probably lied about wanting a coffee just to get me out of the car. He definitely left me here with bad intentions. I had always loved Michael since we met and believed in him, but he doesn't love me. That can't be true. After he yells at me, he usually apologizes and nags because he cares about me. In my rush, it seems I wore my sneakers without socks. My bare feet started to throb with pain from the friction. Tears began to flow from the pain and the betrayal by Michael. Why? What happened? Memories with Michael crossed my mind. I was worried about my mother, but the pain of being betrayed by my first love was overwhelming. Tears wouldn't stop, but I kept walking, realizing only then that I had left my phone in his car. If he truly loved me, he would have rushed to my aid, especially knowing I was stranded without being able to call for help. If he came back now, apologized, and hugged me, I'd forgive everything. He must have noticed my phone on the seat, but there was no sign of his car returning. With my mind in turmoil and my face tear-streaked, I continued on what seemed like an endless path. I had no idea how much time had passed, but just as I started to lose feeling in my tired legs, I finally saw a hospital. I entered the grounds, found the after-hours entrance, and told them my mother's name. My feet hurt terribly from the long walk. It's Smith. Carol Smith. Upon hearing my mother's name, the security guard called someone and then kindly opened the door for me. I was momentarily confused as I stepped in, but soon I heard footsteps approaching from the distance. Are you Miss Smith's daughter? A female nurse appeared from around the corner, and after confirming my name, she escorted me to the waiting room where my father was waiting. There were a few chairs in a dimly lit corner of the hallway, and my father stood there looking restless.
What were you doing all this time?
When my father saw me, he looked shocked to see me dragging my feet, soaked in sweat. Seeing my father, I let out a deep sigh and practically collapsed into one of the chairs. I then calmly recounted the events that had just transpired to my father. What was he thinking? My usually calm father grimaced in anger thinking about what Michael had done. It had taken me about 3 hours to get to the hospital from the time I left home with Michael. The anger and disappointment towards Michael were significant, but I was also worried about my mother's condition. My father, who was initially too shocked by the sight of his battered daughter to notice his surroundings, finally informed me about my mother's situation. Luckily, about an hour before I arrived at the hospital, she regained consciousness and is now resting in the ICU. Neither Michael nor I could be reached by phone. Fearing that something might have happened to the both of us, my father had been quite worried. As I talked with my father, I could feel my affection for Michael gradually waning. When I get home, I'm gonna tell him off for sure. The discomfort I had been feeling all this time was justified. I felt incredibly foolish and pathetic for letting a man like that control me, but now I've finally woken up. I decided to break up with Michael and waited for my mother's condition to stabilize. While my father and I sat on the chairs in the hallway, my father's cell phone rang. Yes. Exactly. My father answered the call with a brief look of surprise, but then nodded as he listened. Well, both my daughter and I are here. After hanging up, my father turned to me and began to speak. It seems Michael was brought here. I unintentionally let out a strange cry and stared into my father's eyes. The call was from the hospital, informing that soon after my arrival, Michael had been urgently admitted. Apparently, after leaving me behind, Michael had gone home with a lot of alcohol. In his drunken state, he had a bad fall down the stairs, and when the ambulance arrived, they found Michael covered in blood. Rather than being concerned about Michael, I was simply astonished. Leaving his wife in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, and then this. Knowing that his mother-in-law was taken to the hospital, yet he was casually having a drinking party. I felt so ashamed and embarrassed to have lived with such a man. I heard Michael had been treated and taken to a ward. Seeing me, he'd probably blame everything on me. Even though I used to love him so much, now I can only think about the things I dislike about him. I'd be embarrassed to be thought of as the wife of such a man by the hospital staff. With a heavy heart, I went to the reception desk, asked for Michael's room, and then went alone to visit him. Lying on the bed, with bandages wrapped around his head and body, was Michael. As soon as he saw me enter, he opened his mouth, anger evident in his eyes. Despite his pitiful state, I could tell he was trying to use me as an outlet for his stress.
Caitlin, what have you been doing all this time? Look what's happened to me. It's all because of.
Let's break up. Before Michael could finish complaining, I abruptly said that. What? Sitting up on the bed, Michael looked stunned.
I've finally come to my senses. You always think everything's gonna go your way. You throw tantrums like a child and cry your eyes out when you're upset.
I looked down on the incapacitated Michael, scolding him for everything he'd done.
I bet you're cheating, aren't you? I'm ashamed I married such a pathetic man. Truly ashamed.
My voice raised, and fear clearly showed in Michael's eyes.
Michael!
Just then, a woman suddenly burst into the room. I turned around and there was Susan. In that moment, I realized everything. Susan and Michael had been having an affair. Thinking back to the last time we discussed things, she had tried to convince me like that's just how men are. I couldn't help but laugh. Susan's eyes widened in surprise, repeatedly saying like,
No! It's not like that!
Susan, don't you realize you've been fooled by such a pathetic man? I truly feel sorry for you. I glared at the two of them and started walking towards the room's entrance. Goodbye. But don't think this is the end. I paused, turned back with a smirk, and said just that. The next day, my mother recovered nicely, but she had to stay in the hospital for a while just to be safe. Seeing my mother's face, I felt relieved and quickly went home to pack my things. Michael, unable to move, was also forced to stay in the hospital for a while. Betrayed by both my husband and friend, all I could think about was how to make them pay. On a whim, I opened the study door that Michael had told me never to enter. He must have thought I'd never defy him. On the study desk, there was a photos of Susan and Michael hugging each other. Everything about it was just pathetic. I took a picture of them with my smartphone and left the home we had shared. Once back at my parents' house, I put my stuff down and headed to a law firm a friend had recommended. The attorney, known for handling divorce and disputes between couples, smiled with satisfaction when I told him everything and showed him the photos of Michael and Susan. We have more than enough evidence. They both are gonna regret this for the rest of their lives. I felt a chill at my own calmness, but fueled by past betrayals, I decided on my next move. Early the next morning, I received a call from Michael.
What the hell did you do? They fired me from my job!
I could almost see Michael sobbing and yelling on the other side of the phone. The truth was, I had called Michael's company pretending to be a concerned wife.
I'm not sure if my husband informed you, but, embarrassingly, he got drunk, caused a scene and fell down some stairs. What? No, it wasn't a car accident.
Yes, Michael had lied to his company about being in a car accident and being hospitalized. Knowing this, I pretended not to know and contacted his workplace. I knew that once they realized it was a false report, they'd dig deeper, which was what I had anticipated. I detailed everything, including the fact he left me stranded in the middle of the night and his affair. Just as I'd hoped, Michael, who had been the face of the company in sales, was given the pink slip. It was probably only a matter of time before this man, who had been up to no good on a daily basis, would bring harm to the company. To add insult to injury, Michael was slapped with the divorce procedure. The news also reached Susan. Eventually, we went through the division of property. When told that the forgotten photos were founded by me, Susan continuously berated Michael. Blinded by immediate desires, they were once a loving couple, but after all, it was just a passing relationship. Playing the blame game wouldn't solve anything. The two soon had a falling out and lost everything. Michael not only lost his job but also had to sell his house. Rumors about Susan's misdeeds spread fast, and it seemed she too lost her job. She apologized tearfully several times, but of course, such actions couldn't be accepted. I intend to have her reflect on the consequences of betrayal for the rest of her life. I finalized my divorce from Michael, and I was single again. It was as if the life I'd lived for several years had been a lie, and my quiet everyday life returned. After the divorce was finalized, I took some time off to take care of my mother. I wonder if, in such situations, people go on what's called a heartbreak vacation here. Returning to my parents' home, I pondered these recent hectic events. In the meantime, my mother had recovered well and was able to convalesce at home. Knowing about the incident that led to the divorce, she seemed somewhat apologetic.
Did all of this happen because of me?
I denied it with a laugh.
No, it's more like a wake-up call. I'm embarrassed that I married a guy like that.
Yet, perhaps concerned about her daughter, she kept asking
isn't there someone good out there for you?
My friend who knew the whole story both consoled and scolded me. But in the end, my friend, who'd warned me repeatedly about Michael and kept saying
I told you so many times,
had a somewhat relieved look.
This time, you just happened to fall for a bad guy. Take your time and find someone good next time.
Right now, I can't even think about another relationship, but I wonder if someday I'll fall in love again. Having felt for years that loving someone wasn't the only path to happiness, my feelings are mixed. But now, I've got so much money it makes me laugh. Some might think I'm a woman without a hint of romance, but compared to the days when I was constantly on edge around Michael, I feel happier now. For a while, I think I'm gonna live freely, relying on my parents' generosity. When I get tired of being alone, I'm sure there'll be another good encounter. This ordeal taught me to stand up with courage and showed me a surprising side of myself that I can do anything if I try. With this newfound confidence, I can achieve anything. And with that, I took a new step forward.